Yeah, so the first thing I would say is slide playing is a gigantic part of what I do. And I've always been attracted to slide, not in the traditional sense of it being a blues thing, but more of a tool to embellish what you're already saying and doing on guitar. So, a big part of my life, I was playing without a slide when I was younger, and all the things I've taken as a musician and a guitar player, inserting this tool to melodic ideas and approaches that I'd already be doing, just open up the world to a different dimension in terms of how you're expressing yourself. So, instead of just saying something like this, for example, it just... It almost just elongates how long you can say things and play things, and it really embellishes the word I stick to. So that's a huge part of it with single note playing. So, from there would also be some chordal playing, so mixing slide with your fingers, which I guess is playing behind the slide a bit, and that's a technique where it just really involves droning with the bottom of your slide while leaving space on top here so that you can actually play chords on top. Let me do that again. So that you can play chords on top. Kind of like those pedal steel. And the behind the slide stuff just gives you more options and more playability and freedom to still play finger style like we normally would, but when there's moments to work in any kind of slide textures, it kind of combines both worlds. And yeah, it's obviously easier playing on your pinky. That's always what's been most comfortable for me. I always stuck to that over the ring finger. That being said, though, I see a lot of people play on their ring, even their middle finger, and they're still incorporating other fingers. But, everything post-slide finger on your hand, those are the fingers that are going to be the most comfortable and natural to use. So I'm not saying you need to switch. I've always told people just play slide on the finger that feels most comfortable and then just make it work for you. This is what works for me, and that's why I do it. People usually, myself included, when I first started playing slide, grabbed the first slide at their guitar store, 3 times the size of their finger, and they take it home, and it sounds really bad, and it's not because they're bad at it, it's because it's too big. And you need to find something that doesn't have to be cutting off circulation in your finger, but just something comfortable that kind of fits like a glove so that you have that control. And then after that, the guitar, it's physics. The strings, if you have really low action, they're already touching the fretboard, it's not going to work. You simply need to use this tool to glide on the strings so that you're, and like not quite pressing down. So you need a bit of that action height to be higher so that you can have that space in between, so that when you slide on the notes, it gives you that air and it glides in that way where the notes sustain. So I promise you do that right away, you're like 50% of the way there. And then after that, it's just a matter of getting everything to sound clean. And that is primarily on your picking hand, because let's say you want to play just on the B string, like the 5th string. But if I don't mute anything, we're hearing a lot of notes that we don't want to. So it becomes this thing of, I call it sandwiching, because whatever note I'm on, I'm always muting the 2 strings in between it, and then the rest of my hand is sitting. So I obviously play with my fingers primarily on my right hand. I rarely use the pick. That's because I like the sound of it. It is warmer, like, versus, it's no better than the other. It's just a personal preference. But more than how it sounds, it's easier and feels more comfortable to mute and do all that stuff with fingers. So that's why I choose to do that. And it's just time, you know, it's recording yourself and doing it over and over, and just paying attention to the nuance of it, and not just the novelty of slide. You know, make it have purpose and meaning and intent, so it's not just like this thing you do because some people do it sometimes. You like use it to like really advance and like bring out the best of your playing. The other thing I would say is, when you're playing slide, the way to kind of get towards that more vocal quality is all about attacking less with your right hand. So if you just, you know, we go with that major scale we were doing. If we're just playing every note we play, we may as well just... But if you attack it as little as possible, then you really start to get that singy kind of vocal quality. And yeah, you need to have that action a bit higher so that you're not running out of steam. I think my action's actually a little low right now. I'm like losing gas as I'm going up. So that's a reminder that I need to tweak this maybe after this video. But those are the biggest things I'd say in terms of the technical side of getting to, you know, just get a good sound with slide, and, you know, don't feel like you need to play behind the slide, or you need to drone, or you need to play chords with the slide. No, you just need to get a good sound with the slide and like serve the musical environment that you're playing in, and just make it work for you. And that's the most important thing, you know? I'd say the second secret, which is not a secret, is dynamics. And that's a huge part of my playing when I'm recording or when I'm playing live, primarily when you're live. It's just the, you know, if we're at 10 all the time, things can be sensory overload. Whenever I go to a concert or any scenario where there's too much of anything, I tend to just, I get tired pretty fast. And dynamics is everything. It's the thing that makes musicians feel something. It's the thing that makes non-musicians feel something. It feels Like it gives everything purpose and tension and release, and it's exciting to me to play with dynamics, because if like I just said, things aren't special if everything was quiet the whole time. Okay, if everything is medium the whole time. Okay, if everything is just loud all the time. Okay, it's a lot of just the one thing. And music and performance is like all about the peaks and valleys and just like trials and tribulations, just like going up and down on a roller coaster, essentially. So I'm very inspired by Jeff Beck. When I remember the first time I ever saw him live, I was not doing this, but I just noticed how much, he'd go from like, and then when he'd open, I don't have really, I'll bring the gain up a bit just to give an example. His full on, whatever, just as an example. But then he'd bring it down. And I was like, wow, he's just so control of his sound, and he's not tap dancing on anything. It's all from his hands. It's like, I feel like there's no better way to be so in touch with your instrument than like fully utilizing these two controls here. And we tend to overlook them. We leave them wide open, and that's fine. I know that a lot of people like to get the most full output of their guitar at all times, and then gain stage on a pedal board. Great. Like, I'm never one to say do it my way. I'm just here to say this is just how I do it. And once I saw Jeff have like two pedals and like just did everything here, just like, that speaks to me. That makes a lot of sense. And eventually just, especially when I'm playing a song and, a chorus, for example, is at this level. But I want my verse to have that same energy, but I want it to be cleaner. I just turn the volume down. But if we're building up a bit more, because I don't want my sound to be dirty all the time. I want to have dirty when it needs to be, and then I want it to be clean, but with a bit of that like muscle and hair that you don't quite get from just a directly clean amp straight through. That's the sound I love, and I need as a musician to get like the sound that I'm hearing in my head to feel comfortable. And yeah, it's just, the dynamics thing isn't just about volume and how it sounds. It's more so about how it feels. And when I'm improvising, I was just talking about in a song scenario, sections are different volumes and dynamic levels. So that really helps. Put in a solo, a couple times a night, we start at a whisper, like almost like you can't even hear it. And it forces everyone to be like, what's he saying? And that's what I like to go to a concert. I want to be captured into what's going on. And then, ideally treat it like a movie, like a beginning, a middle, and an end, introduction to a plot, conflict, climax, and just like build it out like that. And, if we come out right out the gate with, oftentimes, there's nowhere else we can climb to. The only way to go back is backwards. And I never want to be in that position. I always want to give myself endless room to grow. Space speaks a lot louder than a lot of notes sometimes, because it gives listeners a second to digest what you've just said. You might say something really interesting. You go, okay. But if you went, It's like maybe it sounds cool and like technically, wow, maybe not. But what do you remember from that? Yeah, nothing, just a bunch of notes. I have been a big supporter, I guess, of thinking triadically. I don't know if that's even a word, but we'll go with it. That can be in your playing, chords, anything, but I referring it to improvising specifically, and what it lets you do is hearing the chords that you're playing, so that you're, if you're playing unaccompanied and there's no one backing you up, there's no band, I just always want the listener to kind of be able to hear the chords. So, for a super basic example, in a blues, 12-bar blues, right? Now, if we were to improvise it and try to just play a target note, so playing the 3 of every chord, essentially, that's like the most revealing interval of them all. It tells the listener, this is this chord. More than the 5, more than the root even sometimes. So 3, 4. Right? You could kind of just hear and again, this isn't a blues thing, but I'm just using it as an example. It applies to any genre, any style. And it's just a matter of, I don't really think in modes. I try to like trim the fat. I've spent a lot of time in my life studying harmony and theory and stuff like that. And I find that, yes, it's good to understand it. It's a language and it's slang and it's different ways of really using words and making conversation, and different levels of sounding sophisticated and interesting. But at the same time, you shouldn't be thinking, you should just be feeling. And after all the time you put in to take in this information, if you can kind of take in less, it gives you way more output. And I see people trying to improvise and play changes all the time, and I'm switching to this scale here on this chord, I'm switching to this scale here on this chord, I'm switching this, which is fine. Again, I'm very much do whatever you want, like do it the way that you enjoy it. For me, I find I play the most musical and just kind of accessible by staying in the key that I'm of the piece that we're playing in. And rather than feeling like I need to switch to a different scale when the chord changes, I just stay in that key, but I highlight the intervals of that chord within the key that I'm playing in. And when I listen to music, it's very clear what the chord is. Don't get me wrong. When I hear people play very modal and stuff like that, it's beautiful. It's unbelievable. And by default, we all play modal. Like I do too. I just don't think of it as modes, if that makes sense. So just like trimming the fat a bit and thinking in a simpler way, I think allows you to put out a lot more. But you can't do it without putting that time in and learning all that fundamental stuff, which isn't the most fun. But if you get inspired by it, eventually it should motivate you to like put the work in more, I'll just do an example of each interval. So like I did the 3rd already. Here's the root. 3, 4. I just feel like there's some harmonic content that's missing when you leave out like the 3rd or the 6, which is the 3 of the 4 chord, or the 7, which is the 3 of the 5 chord. There's like some real important intervallic nuggets that we need to use there. And here's the thing about using the 5 in this context. Okay, the 5 of the 1 is the 5. So already when we hit the 5 on the 1, it's going to sound like we're playing the 5 chord, right? The 5 of the 4 chord is the 1. So when we go to the 4 chord, it's going to sound like the 1, etc., etc. So let's try it out. 3, 4. Again, if you're playing with accompaniment, sorry, my tone was down the whole time. When you're playing with a band behind you or chords behind you, it'll land. It'll sound really cool. And like you shouldn't switch to, you shouldn't feel like you need to stick to one interval and only play thirds all the time. But for like the instructional, educational, working on it bit, stick to one and like get comfortable with all of them. But just know the role that they each have, you know? The 5 is a bit more elusive. The 1 is a bit more, little too on the nose sometimes. And the 3, if you can weave in and out of it, is kind of like that, it's rich and everything is in there that you want to hear and understand to know what chord it is, you know?